A quickie Friday the 13th cash-in from the director of proto-slasher The Love Butcher from 1975. The Forest is a rather clunky affair, albeit not without some period charm for non-discriminating fans of early 80s slasher cinema. Two couples escape the heat and smog of LA for a camping trip in the wilderness, where they encounter a homicidal hermit with a taste for human flesh and his ghostly kin. Welcome back to the Hysteria Lives channel. I'm JA Kerswell from the Hysteria Lives website, the Hysteria Continues podcast. I'm also the author of the teenage slasher movie book. This time, I'm reviewing a lesser seen early 80s slasher. I'll be discussing the plot, the cast and director, its making of, and cinema release. So join me now as we enter The Forest. The Backwoods sure were a dangerous place for hikers in the early 1980s. Despite this, Sharon, played by Tommy Barrett, and Teddy Ann Wilkinson, tease their respective boyfriends, Steve, Dean Russell, and Charlie, played by John Battis, that they can enjoy a trip in the wilderness without them, as they good-humouredly rail against their male chauvinist jokes. The pair leave, but Steve and Charlie follow shortly afterwards, only to get delayed when their truck breaks down. The women set off for Steve's cabin deep in the forest, but they soon become lost. And if we had any suspicion that Don Jones was aiming to make a feminist horror movie, those thoughts are quickly dashed when the women are shown to not only be unable to navigate the woods, but are visibly exhausted 30 seconds after leaving their car. They can't even put up a tent either without their boyfriends. However, the pair make the best of it and set up a campfire, but are spooked by the appearance of a woman in a chiffon nightdress with a bloody wound on her head, asking if they know where her children are. The woman vanishes before their very eyes, which elicits a rather calm "Who the hell was that?" from Sharon.
Send them home. They must be punished.
Who the hell was that? I don't know.
Later, after falling asleep, she is woken by two strange children who warn her that Daddy is coming, and she flees, leaving Teddy to be attacked by a man in a baseball cap with a large knife, Gary Kent as possibly the least threatening looking of all the killers from early 80s slasher cinema, who tells her he doesn't wish her any harm, he just wants to eat her because he's feeling a bit peckish. Meanwhile, as Steve and Charlie eventually arrive at the national park, they get the requisite backwoods slasher movie warning by a local ranger played by director Don Jones that people go missing in these woods but have a nice time anyway.
You know, over the years, there's been some people who ain't come back from in there. You boys have a good time.
They trudge slowly through the terrain, and there's a lot of trudging and meandering in the forest, and they come across a cave that the killer's brightens up with a wicker rocking chair and a fancy Gothic candelabra. He's surprisingly hospitable considering his earlier murderous excursion. He invites them in, which results in the film's sole truly transgressive moment when Charlie unknowingly eats a piece of his dead girlfriend who is roasting over a fire. This scene leads to a lengthy Q&A info dump session between the hikers and the backwoods cannibal. A flashback shows the reason he lives in the woods is that he caught his wife cheating. He killed her and a repairman lover before hot-footing it to the wilderness with his two children, Jennifer, played by Becky Burke, and John Jr., the quirkily named Corky Pigeon, plus, presumably, that Gothic candelabra. The film has a plot malfunction, however, when we find out that the children, who hated their dead mother, killed themselves for no apparent reason after reaching the forest and have now returned as ghosts. The two men leave the cave and continue looking for their girlfriends, but Daddy's got the munchies again and is soon back on the human hunting trail.
Daddy's going hunting.
The Forest is a somewhat awkward attempt to meld the emerging backwoods slasher with an explicitly supernatural twist, but neither approach really clicks. One of the issues that can occur with slasher movies set in the wilderness is the endless time showing future victims huffing and puffing up hiking trails, and The Forest has this in spades. Possibly the biggest issue is Gary Kent, who is thoroughly miscast as the killer. He's fine with the fight stunt scenes, but he lacks any real menace, and mostly looks as if he'd be happier drinking a Bud Light in that rocking chair rather than chasing and butchering campers. It perhaps doesn't help that the script calls for the character to be both maudlin and psychotic. He mostly looks befuddled. In a misjudged effort to suggest a spectral, his ghostly children's dialogue is so reverb-heavy that it largely becomes unintelligible.
Travis won.
The film may be reaching for pathos, but it misses by a long shot. And worse, for a thriller, it fails to build up any semblance of momentum or urgency. Even the climactic moments are visually lifted from Sean S. Cunningham's Friday the 13th, but not with an ounce of that film's shock value. However, it does open with a scene of 2 other hikers being killed, which was added after the original cut was deemed too short. This prologue would get an award for the character who turns around most and looks into the woods in a slasher film, if ever such an award were to exist. The actress Marilyn Anderson only had one other appearance in the 1983 episode of Dynasty as a secretary, where she graduates from looking at trees to briefly looking at Joan Collins. The Forest gives her other Backwoods slasher, Don't Go in the Woods Alone, a run for its money for worst soundtrack. Its incidental music sounds like a restless drunk fell asleep on a synthesizer. However, like that film's jaw-dropping end song parodying Teddy Bear's Picnic, this movie features what sounds like an Elvis impersonator, warbling lines such as "Many have died in the dark side of the forest." As you guessed it, it shows people trudging slowly along a hiking trail.
Shit.
In the dark side of the forest.
The Forest was shot over 12 days in the Sequoia National Park in October of 1980 on a shooting budget of just over $40,000. Gary Kent appeared under the pseudonym Michael Brody in the credits and on the movie poster due to issues with the Screen Actors Guild labor union. Kent's wife, Tomie, did final girl duties on the film under the name Elaine Warner. The acting generally is a bit wooden, which I guess, given the title, is appropriate. The rest of the cast were mostly made up of soap opera actors. Top billed, Dean Russell's only other credit was a one-and-done doctor in the TV soap One Life to Live in 1982. Anne Wilkinson had a small role in the soap Santa Barbara, but went on to appear in Uli Lomel's supernatural slasher sequel Revenge of the Bogeyman in 1983. Jeanette O'Connor, who played the mother of the Ghost Kids, had the longest career and she's still acting today. She also had a small role in the post-Scream slasher movie The Backlot Murders from 2002. Don Jones claimed The Forest was shot for video, although this seemed unlikely given the October 1980 shooting dates. The director struggled to secure enough money to finish and edit the film and even lost his house making it, but eventually secured funding, which led to a small US cinema run from 1983 in California by Comida Pictures. Later that year, it got released in New York under the title Terror in the Forest by Fury Films and was still in regional release in North and South Carolina as late as summer of 1984. Now, as with some low-budget slashers, it wasn't screened for critics, and I haven't been able to find any newspaper reviews from that time. It went to find its natural home on video in both the United States and the UK, where it's trimmed by 22 seconds of some of its more grisly moments. I first saw The Forest back on an appalling pan and scan VHS transfer some 20 years or so ago, which definitely coloured my view of it. Seeing it now how the director intended certainly improves things a bit, but not enough to lure me back into these particular woods anytime soon. I hope you enjoyed that look back at The Forest. Subscribe for more reviews of obscure and not so obscure slashers and gialli. For the film's body count and over 600 other reviews, visit my website Hysteria Lives. So thank you for watching and I'll catch you next time.